Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to GCSE 2012 Reforms Going Linear. Information on the changes for GCSE French, German and Spanish. What I'd like to do is first of all to look at the first slide and just sort of give you a little bit of information about what the aim of today's session is. I'd like to start by giving you a quick overview of a series of generic slides which explain really the impact on first teaching from September 2012 of the new Linear 2012 specifications. Later on in the session, I'll be focusing on GCSE French, GCSE German and Spanish specific slides, which hopefully you'll find reassuring, as there are a great many less changes for languages than in other subject areas. So again, I hope you find this session useful and reassuring. At the end of the session, as explained earlier, you will have the opportunity to pose questions. You can type them as you go along, or wait till the end. I'll give you an opportunity to type them then, and I'll be responding to them as they come up on the screen at the end. Okay, let's make a start then. So the first slide we have in front of us is entitled, What are the GCSE reforms? If we have a look at the first bullet, you will clearly see that it states that the GCSE assessment is now going to become linear. Essentially, the move towards linear means that the assessments in terms of examinations will be taken at the end of the course. Now for French, German and Spanish we've also got controlled assessments. A little bit more information about those later. They will continue to be part of the GCSE format, but you will only be able to submit the controlled assessments at the end of the student's GCSE course, although you can undertake them when you wish. More on that a little bit later. Okay, the second bullet. Yes, how is this going to impact on you in your centre? This will affect all students who start a 2-year GCSE course from September 2012. Now clearly, if you have students in your centre who have started a 3-year course back in September 2011, then they will of course be affected because this will impact on assessment in summer 2014. Okay, the third bullet is all to do with spelling, punctuation and grammar. Special additional marks are allocated for that in other subject areas. That relates to English language spelling, punctuation and grammar and doesn't apply to these specifications. So let's move on then to the next bullet. Units cannot be reset before cash-in. As you will be familiar with the current specification, one of the key features is that there are resit opportunities. Students at the moment could be entered for listening and reading perhaps at the end of year 10 and then do the other 2 assessments in year 11. That will no longer be a possibility with the new specification. All assessment will have to be either marked or moderated by Edexcel at the end of the course. So they'll be sitting all units together, or entered, or they will be entered for all units together. Examinations are only available in the summer series. Again, for French, German and Spanish, the current specification allows you to enter students in January for their controlled assessments, either for the speaking or the writing unit. That will no longer be a feature of the 2012 specification, as quite clearly all of the assessments will be marked and moderated all together at the end of the student's course. The final bullet is really crucial. Controlled assessments will be able to be taken, you will be able to undertake controlled assessments with your students at any time during the GCSE programme, but those assessments can only be submitted at the end of the course. So you can't submit them during year 10, you won't be able to submit them as you can do now in January. They will only be able to be submitted in the summer series at the end of the student's course. Okay, let's move on then to the next slide. Okay, you'll notice as I populate this slide with more information that it's quite a complex and quite detailed slide with all sorts of timelines and so forth. I do think it's actually quite a useful reference slide for you, but maybe at a later date you can look at this after today, because you'll find later that I've actually put together a slide that is more languages specific, and this really relates to all subject areas. So you'll notice that there are slots there for November and March, which we don't have at all in languages. They're perhaps more appropriate for maths and other subject areas where they have that facility. So let's move on away from that slide and looking at the reforms. The first slide on general changes to the specifications. Well, the first bullet is really crucial. Here we're talking about changes to the specifications, and I really must reassure you that the changes are, for many language teachers, really quite minimal. The first bullet is crucial. With the exception of those subjects where there are marks for spelling, punctuation, grammar, so in other words not languages, there are no plans to change the subject content of our specifications as a result of the Ofqual reforms. Indeed, it is not part of the Department for Education's 2012 linear GCSE agenda to actually make content changes. It's very much about the when, and it's not about the how or the what. So in terms of subject content, there will be no changes to the specifications. You will notice that some of the specifications have been revisited, but the only changes are actually fairly slight, and they really refer to the linear timelines and information regarding purely linear terminal examination changes. Okay, the second bullet again is useful and reiterates what I was saying earlier, that candidates will be required to take all of their GCSE examinations at the end of the course. So they can't take interim units at any point. All of the assessment has to be assessed at the end. Okay, and obviously we're looking at first teaching 2012 onwards, so that impacts on summer 2014 examinations and assessments. As stated earlier, the controlled assessments can be done at any time, but must be submitted at the end of the course in the summer. Okay, and the final bullet on that page is that it just reiterates really the summer assessment window. Okay, next slide. Again, I'm really going to bypass this slide, but I think it's a useful opportunity for me to stress the fact that although the languages GCSEs in French, German and Spanish escape the spelling, punctuation and grammar additional marks for English language, it is very important to stress, of course, that marks will still be applied for knowledge and application or range of language and indeed accuracy in the controlled assessments for writing and speaking in the target language. So obviously no change to the assessment criteria. The knowledge and application, the range and accuracy of language the target language, will still continue to form part of the assessment criteria in the writing and the speaking units, and is clearly an important element of any modern language assessment. Okay, next slide then. Okay, as reiterated earlier, the specifications have been Ofqual accredited, and there are no proposed changes to controlled assessment. You can schedule your controlled assessments whenever you wish. The controlled assessments will continue to be a key feature of the GCSE French, German and Spanish specifications. Probably useful to advise you that in terms of the controlled assessments, in terms of the format, there are no changes. The task types that we use, for example, in the speaking will remain the same, and that you can undertake the controlled assessments in the same way that you do now. So, for example, if you wish to do some controlled assessments during year 10, then you can do so. If you wish to not undertake any controlled assessments with your students until year 11, then that's fine. If you want to do more than the 2 required tasks per skill area, then you can still do that. You could perhaps do 3 or 4 controlled assessments for each of the skill areas, speaking and writing, and then choose the best 2 as you can now. So that facility will still exist. Obviously the big change is that you can only submit at the end of the GCSE programme, so they will be marked in the same series as the other units, the listening and the reading. Okay, so that when ready facility for assessment of the controlled assessments is still there. Okay, the third bullet on this slide again is very important. Controlled assessment unit results may be carried forward if a student wishes to retake the whole qualification. Going forwards, because the linear GCSEs will not allow individual unit resits, if somebody wants to resit a qualification, a French GCSE, a German GCSE or a Spanish GCSE, they would have to retake all 4 units. But in the case of the controlled assessment units, it may be possible for the student to carry forward the results that they gained in their speaking or their writing controlled assessments. However, it may well be the case for some of the students that it's the controlled assessments that they want to improve on. So in that case, yes, it will still be possible for them to resit and retake controlled assessment units with new pieces of work as part of a full qualification resit. And naturally you would need to ensure that any tasks used for the controlled assessments are the appropriate valid ones for the time. It's important to note that the controlled assessments will still, of course, be worth 30% for speaking, 30% for writing of the whole qualification, so the listening and reading will remain unchanged at 20% each. So no changes to content, no changes to the weighting or indeed the format of these qualifications. Okay, next slide I think again re-emphasises that message. Candidates cannot carry forward unit results from examinations from one series to another, except, as you can see there in B, where a candidate wishes to carry forwards the results of one or more controlled assessment unit, although that is very much where the candidate wishes to do that. It is not a requirement. They can retake the controlled assessment units as well. A doesn't actually apply to language qualifications because they have always been a full GCSE award. They have not been a double award, so they will continue to be worth one GCSE as you would expect. Obviously there will be there will be short course GCSEs in French, German and Spanish, both for the oral communication units or the written communication units. In other words, where you combine units 1 and 2, speaking and listening, or combine units 3 and 4, reading and writing. So those short course GCSEs will still exist, but they will only represent a half GCSE course, and therefore will not really contribute to some of the headline reporting measures. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And that takes us to, indeed, the headline indicators. Clearly, languages are a very important GCSE in French, German and Spanish. Talking to teachers and indeed looking at the press quite recently, there's been quite a lot of reporting about the increase of students undertaking examinations in French, German and Spanish as a result of EBacc. A little bit more on that later. So these languages will of course contribute to the 5+ A star to C GCSE reporting measures. Now obviously these have to include English and maths, but languages are quite rightly still valid subjects within those headline indicators. Okay, as indicated earlier, all our GCSEs in languages will be worth 1 GCSE. Obviously this doesn't apply to the short courses as indicated earlier. Those will be a half GCSE and not really figuring in the league tables as such. Moving on, the vocational and academic qualifications will continue to be recognised. Obviously that refers to main programs such as BTECs in business, leisure and tourism and so forth. Edexcel certificates will be included in the new measures. I think that's important, and I just raise your awareness really of the fact that as an alternative to GCSEs in French, German, Spanish and indeed Chinese, Edexcel have submitted new proposals for Edexcel certificates, which very much mirror the international GCSE approach, and those certificates have been approved earlier this year, and you can see draft copies of the specifications on our website. Just to give you a little bit of information about those are 100% examined qualifications, and they don't feature therefore controlled assessments, and they have a more of a traditional approach. As I say, you can gain more information about that from Edexcel via our website. EBacc. Now the English Baccalaureate has clearly paved the way for increasing the status of languages in many schools. Earlier, before coming to this event, I was talking to a centre who was telling me about how the cohort in the school is being really encouraged to undertake a modern foreign language GCSE, and that's having a huge impact on their teaching and staffing commitments. So I think the status of languages fortunately has been raised with EBacc, and therefore a GCSE in French, German or Spanish, or indeed any of the other languages that we offer in our GCSE suite, will contribute to EBacc. Obviously the students who do a language GCSE will also have to ensure that they have a GCSE or certificate in English, maths, history or geography, and 2 sciences. Okay, so I think that's an important piece of information. Okay, the next set of slides are the slides that I've produced that are actually non-generic. These are the nitty-gritty language specific slides, and I'm going to take you through those. But first of all, I'm going to ask my colleague Sarah, please, if you could pop up the first poll. There should be a poll coming on the screen for you. You can see it there, hopefully. Do any of you currently enter students for controlled assessments in the January session? So just give you a couple of minutes to complete that poll. Okay, still a couple of you, I think, participating. Okay, it's quite clear actually from the poll that the vast majority of you don't actually enter students in the summer. So I think clearly that will mean for those teachers that the impact of the linear changes will be quite limited. The flexibility, the facility for teachers to enter their candidates in the January session is something that will be removed from the 2012 specification for all of those students starting a 2-year course in September 2012, or of course for those who started a 3-year course in September 2011. So really, you know, the number of people affected will be fairly minimal. Okay, thank you for that. I've got another poll for you now, so Sarah, if you could put the next poll up, that would be great. Okay, again, the French, German and Spanish specifications currently afford teachers a lot of flexibility. You can enter your students maybe in year 10 for their listening and reading papers, and perhaps undertake the controlled assessments at the end of year 11 or vice versa. You've got a lot of flexibility. Now it's quite clear from the poll here that this is a more popular option than the January assessment window that we have for the controlled assessments. So it's clear that I can see 15% of you are entering students for listening and reading papers prior to the end of the student's GCSE course. Regrettably, this facility will no longer be a feature of any GCSE in England due to the changes that have been brought about by the Ofqual linear reforms. Okay, so thank you for contributing to that poll. Sarah, if you could remove that from the screen, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at those at-a-glance changes. So, apart from what we've just been talking about relating to those polls, there clearly will be, for the vast majority of teachers, quite minimal change. Okay, I mean, that's really been quite clear. Talking to teachers, there are an important number, but relatively few centres that submit for their students for listening and reading in year 10. The January assessment window for controlled assessments in speaking and writing has proved quite popular too, but obviously there is a tendency for centres to wait to the end of the course when students have had more practice, more opportunities to develop their language skills, for them to be assessed then, or certainly to be entered then. Okay, the second bullet on this slide. The changes affect the students who will take their examinations in summer 2014 and beyond. Okay, so there will be assessment windows for the controlled assessments in 2013, but they'll be the last ones. In fact, you'll see later on that I've got a languages specific timeline, and we'll have a look at that in a few minutes or so. Okay, so going forwards, for those students starting from September 2012 over 2 years, they will not be able to submit individual units prior to their full qualification submission. which I think is fairly crucial. And indeed, it's not just individual units, it could be 2 or more units. So no individual resits. The third bullet relates to the fact that all examinations are taken at the end of the course, and clearly all of the controlled assessments, although they can be taken at any time during the GCSE course, can only be submitted at the end of the course in the summer window to ensure that the 15th of May deadline is met. Okay, I've already mentioned that the January assessment window will be removed for these students starting in September 2012. And another important element of the GCSE that we offer is also going to be removed. The short courses, oral communication, listening and speaking, and the short course in written communication, reading and writing will still remain, but it will no longer be possible to combine 2 short courses, one in oral communication and one in written communication, together to form a full course GCSE. So there will be less flexibility, really. Okay, so hopefully some reassurance that not everything is changing, and that there is indeed some continuity. So continuity for most teachers is clearly anticipated. It's quite clear that many language teachers are already entering candidates for examinations at the end of the course, and indeed submitting the controlled assessments as well at the end of the course. Second bullet, really again very crucial. There are no changes to the specification in terms of content, weightings or assessment modes. Okay, so no changes there. 30% for the speaking, 30% for the writing, and 20% for each of the receptive skills, listening and reading. Okay, and as mentioned earlier, the language GCSEs, French, German, Spanish, all languages exempt from the English language spelling, punctuation and grammar additional marks. But obviously the target language marking is unaltered. Okay. No change to the controlled assessments. I must admit that in the past couple of months or so there have been some concerns across the country from teachers once they knew that there were going to be linear changes. Many teachers have said to me, "Oh, linear GCSE, what does this mean? What will happen when the controlled assessments go?" Well, the controlled assessments will in fact remain as a key feature of the controlled assessments. Removal of controlled assessments has not been part of the Department for Education reform agenda. The reform agenda is really focused on when the assessments are undertaken. So the controlled assessments are still very much with us. They will continue in the GCSEs for French, German, Spanish, and indeed for Chinese, Italian and Urdu. Okay, and as stated earlier, the 15th of May deadline will be the one to focus on, because the January window for the controlled assessments will be removed. But the controlled assessments will have to be submitted still by the 15th of May at the end of the student's course. So remember, you can't enter for 2 of the student units in 1 year and then 2 units the following year. That will not be possible. No individual unit resits will be available going forwards after the first awarding in 2014. The controlled assessment units results can be carried forward, but only if a student wishes to retake a full qualification. So quite simply, you have a student who gets their result, their full GCSE result, maybe is not that impressed with their results for the listening. They will not be able to resit the listening unit on its own. They can't resit the listening and the reading unit again as two single units. They would have to resit all 4 units. Now, in terms of the controlled assessments, the controlled assessment units can also be resat, but if the student wishes, and obviously it depends on how well they did with their controlled assessments, they could carry forward their UMS marks into the next series as part of a resit, but that only applies to controlled assessment. Okay, next slide then. I've put together some languages specific FAQs, frequently asked questions, so I'll go through these with you, and before we move on to the timelines and look at the support that's available, there's quite a lot of support that's available, and hand over to you with your questions. So let's have a look at these frequently asked questions that have already come through to me via the subject advisor line and emails. Will all controlled assessments be examined now? Right, so the controlled assessments still very much part of the 2012 GCSE. As you will know, the controlled assessments for writing are examined by Edexcel. Every piece of written work that a student produces and that is submitted as part of the 2 writing tasks for controlled assessment is marked by an Edexcel examiner. They're not moderated, they're not marked in centres formally. They may be marked informally, but not as part of the examination requirements. However, for the speaking controlled assessments, these are currently teacher marked. They're teacher assessed, and we moderate them. Now, as stated earlier, there are no changes to the format or the assessment modes to these qualifications, to the new linear GCSE. So the controlled assessments for speaking will still continue to be teacher marked, but Edexcel moderated, so no change there. Next bullet on this slide, will the number of controlled assessment opportunities be reduced? Well, apart from the fact that the January window will be removed for French, German and Spanish, you can still, or your students can still undertake as many controlled assessments as you think are appropriate for them. You will know your students best. So if you wish, your students can undertake 2 controlled assessments for the writing unit, 2 controlled assessment units, 2 controlled assessment tasks for the writing unit. They can indeed do more controlled assessment tasks if they wish, and you will then submit the best 2. Obviously, in the case of the speaking controlled assessments, one of the marks that you would submit would need to be supported by a recording. And the recordings will be required, and we will take a sample of those recordings as specified on the optems as usual. So no change there. Will new controlled assessments be produced? Well, we've currently, you will have spotted that from September the 5th, 2011, we put on the website some new controlled assessment tasks that you can use. You will be able to use these up to summer 2013, and there's no reason why you cannot use those going forwards, so long as they are refreshed. In other words, you would need to change at least 1 key bullet point in each of those tasks. It is indeed possible for you to revisit some of the 2009-2011 controlled assessment tasks, so long as they are revisited and they are changed in some way, so at least 1 key bullet point being changed. Okay, so still a lot of flexibility there. You can of course as you can now, produce your own controlled assessments, and that will be fine. It's still part of the specification that allows you to have a lot of freedom in terms of content and assessment control. Okay, next bullet. How do these affect students in Year 9 who started a three-year course in September 2011? It is quite clear that languages, and indeed all subjects, are being delivered in quite different ways across different centres. There are quite a few centres now who are delivering 3-year GCSE courses. Now, anyone who has started a 3-year GCSE course in September 2011 will have to enter their students for accreditation in September 2014. So I think it's crucial that they're aware of these changes, and that they will not be able to enter those students for interim individual units or individual sets of units. They will have to do all units, or be entered for all units at once at the end of the full GCSE course. Okay, how will these reforms affect GCSEs in other languages? I have in fact delivered other sessions specifically for Italian, Chinese and Urdu, and also for Arabic, Greek, Japanese and Russian, and so those events have already taken place and have been recorded, and I understand that those recordings will become available at a later date on the website. Okay, but if any of your colleagues have got queries regarding the reforms, then obviously they can contact me in the usual way. More information about the support in a couple of minutes. But first, as promised, this slide shows you the timeline that is much more focused on languages. So these are the specific ones really for French, German and Spanish. You'll notice that there are a series of boxes. There are some green boxes and some pink boxes. The pink boxes relate specifically to the specification. So the GCSE 2009 as we know it. The green boxes will refer to the new linear GCSE for first teaching from September 2012 over 2 years, although as you will see here in the green box, first teaching for 3-year GCSE courses was in September 2011. Okay, if we look at the green box on the right hand side of the slide, clearly that refers to the fact that the GCSE qualifications will only be available in the June windows. So you can discount any references to November or March or January. The language assessments will only be able to be moderated or assessed in the summer, in the June, in the May-June examination series. Okay, moving on now to the next slide, supporting you every step of the way. Okay, we're going to try and ensure that you are confident about the changes. So we've started the process, and this session is hopefully one of the ways that we can do that, to simply reassure you that in general terms the changes for languages are quite minimal. Certainly the changes have less impact than in some of the other curriculum areas. So what will we be doing? Well, from the autumn term onwards, there will be new Exam Wizard resources and Results Plus support. Exam Wizard will enable you to do all sorts of exciting things in terms of creating question papers and that sort of thing. So I think you should find that useful, and there'll be more information about that on the website in due course. Clearly, controlled assessments are going to continue to be a key feature of these qualifications, and we will continue to support you with a whole series of different training events, either online, through network events, or standardization type training. So a lot of support there for controlled assessment. Planning, schemes of work are going to be looked at to support you through the specifications, and of course there will be more online network events going forwards as well. Okay, apologies for another picture of my ugly mug, but it is important to stress that I, and of course the whole subject advisor team, are very keen to support you. You can ring the dedicated number that's there on your slide, or of course, perhaps more convenient for you, you can email the languages subject advisor team at the email address there on your slide at any time of day, and we will aim to respond to your queries, whether related to the linear reforms or other general qualification issues that you have to do with languages. Many of you may be familiar with our Ask the Expert service. That service enables you to ask qualification and language specific queries to senior examiners. So for example, if you have a GCSE German query, you could email through to gcsegerman@edexcelexperts.co.uk, and a senior examiner would be able to respond to your query, usually within 2 to 3 working days. Okay, so again, a very useful service. We do try to keep you informed as much as possible, and you will have no doubt been aware of mailings that were sent out to senior management teams in your schools and centres over February and March to ensure that you're aware of these reforms. In fact, it's not just the subject advisor service and the subject page, which I'll talk about in a minute or two, but there's a lot of resources that are available on our website to support you. For example, for French, German and Spanish, if you look on the GCSE Spanish or the GCSE French or GCSE German specific homepage and go to the controlled assessments category, you'll be able to click on tasks and see, click on controlled controlled assessments. You'll be able to see that not only have we provided tasks, which are available via the tasks tab, but we've also put some examples of student work from summer 2011 up for you. So those examples of student work are accompanied by assessment commentaries, and they're there for writing and they're there for speaking, and those commentaries are accompanied by marks with assessment with examiner notes explaining why a certain piece of work has scored 8 or 3 or whatever the mark issued may be. And you will notice that I think is an improvement perhaps from our previous examples, which were within mark bands. So you've now got exact marks allocated for each of the assessment criteria in the writing and in the speaking in those examples of student work. So hopefully you'll find those really useful, and hopefully that will inform any marking that you undertake within your centre, maybe for internal reporting reasons. The subject page, I hope that many of you are aware of the languages subject page. You notice when you go onto the main Edexcel website, you can opt to go into the qualifications page, but there's also a subjects page. If you go into the subjects tab and then just click on languages, you'll see that there is a languages specific page, and there's all sorts of material on there. There are all sorts of articles that have been produced, possibly by some of our examiners, possibly by other stakeholders or teachers, and there's a community there where you can share ideas and resources with other colleagues, and also useful updates. If I think, for example, of some of the recent updates, there's a reminder of the different controlled assessment and other examination admin requirements, but linked to that there's also some direct links to some other support that we put together some time ago about taking you through the controlled assessments and making sure that you're well supported in that area. So getting to grips with controlled assessment article is there for you. Okay, next slide. Really, this is the last slide until the any questions slide, and this really should just reiterate what the key messages are. You will have noticed that there has been some repetition, but I think it is really important to ensure that the key changes are really crystal clear to you. There is a move to linear assessment, the facility for more flexible assessment in terms of January assessment windows or taking early assessments in year 10. Will go with the new linear assessment. So that's really what it means in a nutshell. In terms of the content, then that is not really changing. The marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar really relate to the English language and only really affect English literature, history, geography and religious studies, so not really an issue for modern languages. The subject content and indeed the format of the GCSE specifications is not changing. The controlled assessments are still there, the assessment weightings have not changed. It's all very much as you are currently now familiar with. So there's no plans to change the content of the controlled assessments. They are still there. The same assessment task types will still continue to be offered for the speaking unit, so students will be able to do a picture-based discussion or a presentation with follow-up questions type activity, or indeed an open interaction. So that there's still those three task types that are available, and your students will have to undertake 2 of those task types as part of their assessment experience. Units cannot be resat before cash-in, so basically if you want to gain a qualification, you are submitted for entry in one go. If you want to retake French, German or Spanish, then you would have to retake the whole qualification, unless of course you wish to carry forward any controlled assessment results as indicated earlier. The exams are restricted to the summer series, okay, so there's no January controlled assessment as currently. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the slide, and so a couple of the final bullets. The headline indicator, again, no change there. Languages still clearly contribute to the 5 plus A star to C GCSEs, and of course is still a really important part of EBacc. So any foreign language, obviously including French, German and Spanish GCSE, should contribute to EBacc. Okay, if you want more information or clarification, then go to the link that you can see on the bottom of this slide. There's more information on the languages subject page as well. And obviously you can ask me or any of the languages team questions via the languages subject advisor email address or via the telephone number. Okay, moving on then. The next slide is the any questions slide.